Good evening. Thank you for tuning in to Veterans Voices. Tonight, we'll be talking about anger in the veteran community with veterans and those that care about them. We'll be right back with our first guests. Thanks for being with us. Today is November 19th, 2018. I'm Nathan Johnson, the County Veterans Service Officer. Veterans Voices is committed to serving the community by educating our viewers about veterans issues, our issues, and providing resources to vets and their families. Our hope is to make television part of the solution. I'm grateful to be joined by my co-host, Air Force veteran Kira Cerna.
Thank you, Nathan.
Thanks for being here.
It's good to be back. If you're at home watching and want to join our discussion, please feel free to call us right now at 925-313-1170. Our phone lines are open, and we encourage you to call in. You can also send us an email at veteransvoices@contracostatv.org or connect with us on Facebook at Veterans Voices 1. As a way to help break the ice on this topic, we asked members of our production staff to help us start this conversation by sharing their own experiences. We're joined by Dr. Shauna Springer and Ryan Berg.
Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So tonight we have a very interesting topic. We're going to talk about anger. And we, as the four of us, as members of this show, are going to open it up to our audience and somewhat break the ice and develop some space and trust by talking about it ourselves. So. This is a topic we've been planning for several months, and I've been thinking a lot about it. And I kind of start back in my roots of my military experience when I joined the Marine Corps. And in boot camp, I remember the drill instructors, very particularly, were only receptive to the emotion of anger. If you wanted to show them that you were happy, or that you were sad, or in pain, or tired, they absolutely corrected that right away, and really only wanted to see the emotion of anger, because I think that that's really what is able to fuel you through very difficult times in the military. I don't know if Ryan, you've been in the military, Kira, you've been in the military, if you can connect with that in any way. But
Absolutely. I think it's a very celebrated emotion in the military. I think it's part of military culture. When you first hit boot camp, that's, in my experience, that's all I was exposed with. Angry drill instructors, whether they were really angry or pretending to be angry, they seemed angry to me, and you know that continued through the rest of training.
Right, right. Yeah, and you know, I think in the military also, anger is used to a certain extent by ranks, right? And so, as the rank of gunnery sergeant, I remember very particularly, to maintain control and order and discipline, it was almost assumed that a gunnery sergeant was a very angry person. So I remember becoming a sergeant in the Marine Corps and feeling like, in order to communicate with my Marines, I had to present this certain type of anger emotion to really be respected and to be heard and to be listened to. So I think anger, for me in the military, was a very programmed emotion. And you know, in times that I was in a lot of pain and was very tired, it was very effective.
You know, I always find that point interesting, because truly I think the alpha in a lot of different tribes is the one who doesn't have to raise their voice. And I think back to the episode we did on high dose caffeine use in the veteran population, and how, for me, like, I got red as a beet, and I felt like throat punching all of you and running off the stage, because you brought me that, you know, giant monster. You said you'd bring me a little one, and then, you know, so, you know, there's different kinds of anger. You know, I think for some people, like, their anger burns really hot, and for me, you know, sometimes, like, my anger burns cold. And so I have a photo. Chris, cue photo if you would. A photo to share for tonight's episode. We'll see what this photo
I didn't know there was a photo.
Yeah, I have a special photo to share.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead and share that, Chris, when you're ready.
I don't think Chris was prepared with it. We'll get it. We'll get it in a second.
We'll get it up in a minute.
Yeah, you know, I wanted to say that to your point, you know, about anger being really programmed.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, where did
there it is.
Kidding me.
Speaking of programming, that young recruit right there probably heard at least a few times.
And you're welcome.
Wait, where's that photo at? Someone keeps interfering.
You're welcome.
That's oh man.
Some people's
that was like 19 years ago. That was a long time ago. But what about it? Now I feel very angry.
Well, I wanted to.
Are you angry, Nathan?
I'm a little bit red in the face. Yeah, absolutely.
And you're welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. Passive aggressive, Shauna. Thank you. We'll talk about that later.
I wanted to say, I asked my buddy. I went home to celebrate, or I went to Des Moines to see my buddies. So I served with in Iraq to serve the Marine Corps, to celebrate the Marine Corps birthday recently. And I asked my friend, my squad leader, I asked him, what is it about anger in the veteran community? What in your mind? And he said that instant willingness and obedience to all orders, when we get to boot camp is really the first thing we hear. And it's like you said, it's programming. And so when we're driving down the road, and I notice this in my life presently, if someone's not doing the right thing or following the rules, and to connect that to my military service, if I didn't follow the rules in Iraq, that was a very serious thing. People could have got hurt, people could have died, and so I think, the issue around control is particularly emphasized in my life as a veteran because of my service, and around control and following the rules, the perceived rules in my mind. So,
how do you respond to people who are angry? Because I think that's different for me. I can find that the use of anger, I can turn it on right away. But when someone else is using anger as an emotion towards me, I tend to want to quickly kind of calm them down, as if it's not an acceptable thing, right? That them being angry is something that needs to be corrected. I don't know if Kira, you look like you're going to jump in there.
Well, logically, I think that, right? But sometimes, it's just, it kind of goes back to what Ryan was saying too. If you feel someone's getting angry at you, when I got out of the military, I was a non-commissioned officer by then. You get used to people listening to you. You tell someone what to do, they need to follow orders. And so when you get back and you feel like nobody's listening to you, that can make you angry. If someone else confronts you with me specifically with anger, for me that makes me angry because I feel disrespected. And it's I think we always have things that we're trying to improve upon. I know that's something for myself I need to improve upon. And it's different in different situations. If someone that I don't know well, I can be a lot more composed. And, but if it's a personal situation, then I think that makes it a lot more difficult.
And I think you said it when you said, that disrespect often comes in. Road rage is such a common thing for people that sometimes we, take it as disrespect. And really it's interesting because I think in the military, there's this set of rules by which you drive and you're always in constant communication. And so moving from place to place is often more like a flock of birds. Whereas when you're hurtling through space, and nobody's paying attention to the rules, it can feel not only very alarming and like people are not doing the right thing, but they're really disrespecting something that feels kind of sacred to you, which is consideration and respect for each other.
And safety.
Yeah.
And sometimes, that fear response can lead to people feeling angry too if we feel like our life is threatened. This person had my family in the car, this person cut me off. They just threaten not only my life, but the life of my children. That fight-flight response can kick in, and then, the anger can spiral from there.
And I think stress levels too, threats in the civilian world, threats can feel more intimidating or I can have an inappropriate response to a threat that really isn't as much of a threat, that I'm making in my mind. So, going to Iraq, coming home, threats can just seem intense, from a stress level. And so, I think anger is part of that response, and I think that as veterans we need to recognize, especially, I've been sort of reflecting on the fact that, being in a combat zone, being in a war zone, can make me feel anger, but why? I've never really thought about that, and it's because I was just trying to survive while I was there, and anger is summoned or aroused in those environments. And so I'll be honest with you, I was talking with my wife a few days ago, preparing for this show, and I said, sweetie, I think that I have PTSD. It was a moment of just reflecting on how I respond to the world around me, and she said, and anger, right? And when she said that, I was in reflective space, and I just thought, yes, she's right. I do have anger, and it was a moment for me to just kind of look at it with her, and so. Anyway.
But I think, one of the reasons that I really wanted to be on this part of the show was to say that this isn't just a veterans issue. Like, people have anger. And for me, the transition that I perceived was when I became a mother. I was totally calm and very proud when my husband was like football player yelling in my face to sort of encourage me during delivery. And I was like, that's not helpful. Please stop. Totally calm. And then when my kids were born, if anybody threatens my kids, I go primal,
Absolutely.
And that, it's can happen to all of us when we feel primally threatened. It's not just veterans,
And that's a very good example of when anger can be useful.
Yeah.
Anger is a useful, purposeful
Healthy.
emotion.
Normal and needed, right?
And we can channel it in a constructive way, or it can be very destructive too. If, say, perhaps our anger is out of proportion, right? We feel falsely threatened, our false alarms go off. Like, say, for example, our boss pisses us off at work, right? And we can't really say anything to our boss because we want to keep our job. We get home, maybe we take it out on the kids, the dog, whatever. That's a very good example of how that anger can be channeled in a very destructive way. So I think for me, I've just had to learn to be very mindful, ask myself, where is this coming from? For you, Ryan, you were talking about how you had a lot of anger when you were in combat, and it was probably very useful for you back then. It probably helped you out a lot. But now, back here in the U.S., on the streets, is it going to help you out? There may be some situations.
Speaking of helping, I think, because we just have a couple minutes, I think it's important to spend a little bit of time just talking about what we do to help ourselves work through anger, because we want to feel it, we should feel it, but how do we get past it? I think for me, having really good people in my life helps me. When I feel like there are positive people in my life, supportive people in my life, just their presence helps calm any situation in which I feel really angry. Just looking at them, really kind of feeling their energy as well. So I really try my best to have good people in my life that I know see the good things rather than seeing the negative of things. That really helps me a lot. And the road rage, I think I shared it earlier, but not yet on this episode, because I really suffer from that, in which I in a Humvee in Iraq, if I wanted to drive on the sidewalk, I could drive on the sidewalk, but I can't do that in the United States. So I tell myself, I'm just going to let this person pass by me, and I'll never see them again in my life. So that works for me. I don't know what strategy you guys use.
Self-talk works a lot for me too. Just being mindful of what I'm feeling, talking through it in my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think awareness so that it doesn't kind of ambush you is so important. For me, that's been very helpful to know where I'm at, because helplessness doesn't feel good to any of us.
Yeah.
And so when anger is there, it doesn't feel good, sometimes after the fact, but even during. What about you, Ryan?
What's helped me the most is expressing my anger and having someone hear my anger. I once heard recently that frustration is anger with nowhere to go. And I think as a veteran, I found myself frustrated quite often in coming home, and I think I didn't really know how to express my anger in a way that it landed with anyone, with the outside world. So it wasn't coming out. It was just sort of boiling inside. And so expressing it verbally was most helpful. So.
Guys, this has been great. We're out of time, but I'm really glad we had a chance to have this conversation. I think we've created a safe place, a safe space. I think we've kind of broken the ice here on the topic of anger, and hope that our audience can join us. If you haven't done so already, call us. We have a phone number for you to call. We have Facebook. We have an email account. Plenty of ways for you to get engaged in tonight's conversation about anger. Thank you for being with us as we talk about this very important and difficult topic, and in some ways long overdue as well, in regards to veterans and anger. Are you out there with your own experiences on this topic, or a question on the tip of your tongue? Again, encourage you to call in, be a part of this conversation. We'd love to hear from you. 925-313-1170. I think we already have a question coming in, as a matter of fact, right now, which is great. Stay with us. Next up, Ryan Berg had a chance to connect with veterans about anger at the VA Martinez Clinic in our Vet on the Street segment. Take a look.
What do you think is the main driver that fuels anger in our community? in our community, or you talking about the veterans community? You know, I don't really know much about that. I just know that this facility here helps the veterans quite a bit. And me as a veteran myself, I appreciate everything they do for us, you know, especially that they take good care of us, you know, and the bottom line is that I have nothing to be angry about with the Veterans Administration. So, you know, if anybody does have anger, you know, they should just take it up with some of the staff here and talk about it and find out if they can resolve their issues.
So I'm hearing you say that some of the anger might be around care, receiving adequate support.
Exactly, the care and probably time frames, waiting around too long, you know, and not getting taken care of on time. You know, people can get a little frustrated behind that. And that can be an issue. That can trigger anger very, very quickly, especially in the Vietnam veterans.
And what about anger in the veteran community? What do you think is the number one or number two sort of driver that fuels anger in the vet community?
I think it's okay to me.
You're not angry?
No.
You look a little angry.
Sometimes.
Okay.
Like, you know, something come out in my head, and then I'll kind of a little bit aggressive right away.
Anything veteran related to your experiences, perhaps?
Probably I do. But you know how it is.
No, I don't. Why don't you tell me?
Well, when I was in the jungle and everything come out in your head, and then come back here, all kind of everything going on. Plus, like normal people talk, and then they say something to you, and then kind of you don't like it, then I start getting mad. Since I've been in a war zone and a lot of things going on, when you come back here, they're all different. Back again in different situation. That's all.
How do you express your anger?
Like sometimes when talk to my wife, and you know how it is. Before normally we talk, and then talk to me. Then I say that why I so angry? Because I don't have to be. Where is coming from? I don't know. It got a lot of going in my mind. That's all.
So a lot of anger could be traced back to your experiences in the jungles of Vietnam.
I think so. But some people, they don't realize what's going on out there and here.
So a lack of awareness in society for what you went through creates some anger. What do you think is one of the drivers that fuels anger in the vet community, sir?
Well, not getting what you want when you need it, for one.
Such as?
And then you got to wait a long time before you get an appointment. You know, so you got to get a referral.
What types of things are we not getting that we need, and when we want it?
Pain management. Pain meds. When you need them, you can't get them. I keep telling them I need it. Then they send you to a group of people that want to tell you what you need. They don't know my body. I'm the one that's in pain, not you. Because if I could trade bodies with you, you would never get it back. Like that. Let them know how I really feel. But
Welcome back to Veterans Voices. We hope you enjoyed that segment, and we have a question we want to address here. It's actually from our email, and it's someone who's anonymous. Does the military always increase anger, and can it build maturity for dealing with difficult situations? So thank you for whoever sent that question in. And Shauna, you said you wanted to address that.
I think it's underappreciated part of military training is restraint, and that, channeling aggression towards the right threat at the right time is part of military training. And I also think that a lot of times with anger management, we think we have to teach people new skills. I found that with many of my veteran patients, it's a matter of migrating the skills they already had to this issue, because what veterans are often really skilled at is self-mastery of their own bodies. They can regulate their own bodies very well to squeeze the trigger or whatever it is to keep themselves calm in a chaotic situation. And if you can move that skill over to self-mastery in situations where you feel out of control or helpless, it's really powerful.
Yeah.
So absolutely, it's a great question.
Yeah, great question, and thanks for answering that.
We are now joined by Skype with Anthony Anderson from the film Almost Sunrise.
Hello.
Anthony, hello. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you all?
Hi, Anthony. Oh.
Yeah, it's good. So you are somewhat of a celebrity, I understand, your film Almost Sunrise. And so thanks for taking the time to join us tonight by Skype. And before we start talking about tonight's topic on anger, tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Sure. Well, I joined the military in 2002. My first deployment to Iraq was in 2004. I volunteered for that one. My unit wasn't actually deploying. And I crossed the border into Iraq the night of the election between George Bush and John Kerry, just to give you guys a measure of context. I was in the infantry. So I did what the infantryman does 2004 to 2005, go out on patrols, go out on raids, do humanitarian missions. I came back and I was home for about a year and a half. And then I volunteered to go back. I did another tour in Iraq, this time about an hour north of Baghdad, doing basically convoy logistic support, so providing all the security for all the contractors going through. I was married for both my deployments. I didn't have a kid. But when I came home, about 3 months after I came home from my first deployment, that's when things really started to kind of change for me. Kind of the experiences that I couldn't really put into words or really understand were starting to manifest themselves in ways that I didn't understand. And I was having to find ways to try to deal with them, and I did that for several years, which is ultimately what brought Tom and I to walk from Milwaukee to California.
Well, thanks for joining us, Anthony. And so we've been talking, and you've probably been listening a little bit about the conversation so far. So, and you mentioned some of that change occurring for you. How have you dealt with anger? How has anger been a challenge for you, if at all, in your life?
Anger is actually one of the biggest things that I dealt with. I didn't really know what I was dealing with. When I first deployed, I was 21 years old. Turned 22 while I was raiding someone's house in Baghdad, and I didn't really understand or have any context for what it was I was dealing with. So when I came home, I found shortly thereafter that the only emotion I could really feel or access at any given moment was anger. That everything was put through the lens of anger. That I could go from completely calm, or what I thought was calm, to irrationally upset in the blink of an eye. And that most time, I would do this with the people that I loved most, those that were closest to me. Very rarely with friends, very rarely with coworkers, predominantly with my wife and my family. And I did it as a way to keep people really on the margins of my life, that I didn't want to invite them in and kind of bring them into the chaos that I didn't really even understand. That it was something of a coping mechanism for me, that if I could keep them right on the mark, just far enough away to stay away from the bad, that maybe I could bring them back in when things are getting a little bit better. But really what it took was me, I mean, honestly, like walking to California and taking those 5 months to really be with myself, be with my friend Tom, and really confront these things head on.
And Anthony, what did you learn from that experience? What tools did you use? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Mm-hmm.
So both Tom and I were certified peer mentors, so we really wanted to help one another, both as combat veterans dealing with really the issues that veterans deal with, trying to help one another all along the way. A lot of what I worked with, like cognitive behavioral therapy with therapists at the VA, so I had elements of that. I had mindfulness, meditation, and different breathing techniques. I'd gone through kind of the Rolodex of anxiety medications and sleep medications and all of that. But really what it was, I think, was peer-to-peer support, and then being honest and confronting these things. When people ask me, well, how does walking really do anything to help you address anger? Basically, I put it like this. When you're angry, you're full of energy, you're full of anxious and angry energy. And so when the thought of why am I angry comes in, you can redirect that energy and say, it's my wife, it's my government, it's my experience, it's my neighbor, it's any number of things. But when you walk, when you do something that begins to physically exhaust yourself, you lose the ability to take that energy and put it towards resistance. So when the thought of why am I angry comes in, you let it sit with you and really start to look at how anger is impacting you in your life. It's so easy to assign blame to other people, but when you really look at how anger is affecting your life and what you're doing with it, that's when I really started to see that anger has no purpose other than to just perpetuate anger.
So Anthony, there was a scene in the movie where it seemed like you really made a big shift, where you came into this space and you had this view out over this tremendous, you know what I'm talking about, right? I watched this when I was at the SAMHSA Voice Awards and said, I've got to meet this guy at some point. What happened in that scene, and how does this relate to what you learned about yourself on that journey?
Yeah, so immediately after that scene, I was having a conversation with Wolf Walker in which I was talking about different people and relationships in my life and how they were toxic and how they were just bringing me down and how I felt like I had no control over changing it, how I just kind of felt like I was a victim to the feelings that I had. And he was able to talk to me about how, and you see a little bit of this in the film, kind of that reclaiming of your power, reclaiming of your own influence and control over your own life. That in that moment, I think I was open to the ideas that maybe I had a little bit more control. When we walked out and all of a sudden I went from this tight, closed-in environment, it was very much like real life for me because my anger would drive me away from people. I would isolate myself and I would primarily spend my time in my basement. So that's kind of like what being in that canyon was for me. And then all of a sudden I go back out into the real world, walking across 7 states, and I'm walking here with my friend and Wolf Walker, and I'm seeing these things. And it really was a very powerful reminder to me of how big the world was and how little I was allowing myself to be exposed to it, that I was really cutting myself off. So I think that moment in time was especially influential for me because, you know, everyone, it's kind of cliched to say, just think of how small you are and how big the universe is. But really what it was demonstrating to me how small my anger was making me and how big the world around me was and how little I was actually experiencing it.
Yeah.
So Anthony, you seem to have a good understanding of this and have really worked through it. And I'm wondering, how do you recommend we connect as veterans with each other, or even connect with the community, because anger is not a specific veteran problem. So how can we connect with each other and have a conversation and help each other when anger is an unhealthy thing in our life?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important things that a veteran can do is tell his or her story. I think getting out and explaining what the experience of not just being in combat or just serving, but really the entire thing. I think that that's the most important elements, is actually getting out and telling your story. So few people actually serve in the military that they think it's just what they see in commercials, you know, that we jump out of airplanes and we come home and we have parades and everything is great and we're heroes and we move on with our lives, that they miss really the meat of what it means to be a veteran. So I think going out and telling your story from the veteran side is very important. With respect to those around the veteran, especially within the theme of anger, do not give up hope. Do not lose hope. This is not something that we can just come home and say, you know what, I did these things, I'm moving on for them. They take time. They take a lot of hope. They take other veterans' help. So I think connecting veterans, being willing to share your story, and those surrounding veterans, just being as patient as you possibly can, knowing that the people that you love and respect are still the same people. We just have experiences that we're just trying to understand in the context of our lives.
Anthony, I want to thank you for joining us. Again, Anthony Anderson from the movie Almost Sunrise. I encourage our audience to go out, watch this great film. Anthony, again, really appreciate you being a part of this conversation tonight. We'll have you back on the show at a time again in the future. So we'll be back in just a moment. Thank you. Welcome back to Veterans Voices. We're now joined by 3 veterans, Thurman McCormick, Matthew Pruitt, and Octavius Scott. And again, joined by Dr. Shauna Springer. So thank you guys for being here tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having
So before we get into this conversation, just real briefly, just tell us a little bit about your military service.
I was with the 196th Light Infantry Brigade in Vietnam, 1967 to 68.
Thank you.
Matthew Pruitt, U.S. Army, 2000-2010. I deployed to Iraq with the 272nd Military Police Company from 04 to 05, and Afghanistan, 06 to 07.
Oh, thank you.
Octavius Scott, U.S. Navy, 2005 to 2013. I deployed with the 2515th Naval Air Ambulance Detachment, Camp Buehring, Kuwait, 2007 and 2009.
Well, thank you again for your service, gentlemen, and thank you, Dr. Springer, for being here as well. So we've talked a little bit and kind of cracked the ice open a little bit on the topic of anger, and we haven't made this a problem that's necessarily specific to veterans, but where do you guys remember anger really kind of identified in your life? For some people, it even falls before they even join the military. It could have been a part of their childhood, but you know, for some people, like I shared earlier, it's kind of built into us when we join the military. It was a kind of a trained aspect of our life. So, Octavius, you care to jump in and share with us a little bit about how and when anger became an emotion that you recognized and were able to use?
Sure, I think that, as you know, most people experience anger very young, as early as on the playground. Kid took your ball. I mean,
yeah, right.
And I think that's where you originally you start to experience anger at first.
Yeah, certainly. And do you feel that at that young age that it was very accepted for you to be angry? Were people trying to calm you down, or teachers necessarily telling you that it's not okay to be angry on the playground? Or do you feel like you were taught at a young age that anger is a way that you should feel if someone's taken something from you?
I think that it's not something that society actually thinks is normal. So I think that early on, individuals are taught to suppress anger.
Yep. Right. Yeah. Matt, what about you? You look like you're in thought here, but feel free to open up anywhere. But
Yeah, I think for me, I think a lot of some of the anger that I experienced was when I came home, 2010. It was kind of the lack of respect that a lot of the civilian community had, and not really, you don't really have the same kind of loyalty that you had, when you're in the military, that you have with your comrades. So you kind of look for that, and it's really not there, and it becomes kind of frustrating, and you really kind of feel like you're lost and on your own, and it's just, it's what I noticed, and I think that's where some of my anger came from.
And what about for you, Thurman?
Well, it's a long one. But anyway, I'm kind of like him. When we came back, everybody didn't like us. We were all hated, baby killers and everything. But you sucked it up, you pushed it down, but then you had to get a job. So I got a job where it was like the military with the phone company. It was staggered just like that. But
you're talking in terms of like rank and file?
Right,
and
rank
such?
and file, platoon, it went up like that. But in there is where I really had the anger. I used that anger to get up every morning and go to work, do my job, be able to, because the more I got angry, the more I could focus on my job.
Interesting.
So you channeled it in a way that worked for you.
Yeah, I channeled it in that way. I didn't care what people thought. I could care less, because as long as I was good at my job, that anger pushed me further and further.
Yeah.
Without that anger, I don't think I could have worked for 33 years. But it made it miserable for people and myself.
Okay.
Because I ran into a person, and about 20 years later, and she looked at me, she said, "You weren't very nice when we worked together." Not in those words, but yeah, but something like that, Yeah. So, anger was a big part of my life while I was working, and I kept it, And now I'm trying to get rid of it. I'm retired, so now I'm trying to find ways to kind of channel it away from my wife and my family, and try to make myself better. And it's been a long job, you know, a long journey. So
I just want to recognize this is a very difficult thing to talk about. This is not easy.
No.
This makes us maybe a little vulnerable in sharing some of these experiences. When you feel anger, and you mentioned that other people are affected by it, what do you notice about yourself, and what do you notice about others when that emotion first comes out? Does it make you feel good? Does it make you feel strong? Does it make you feel powerful? Does it make you feel...
It makes me feel powerful that I can focus.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And what do you recognize about others in their response to it? Does it make them a little bit more defensive? Does it push them away? Does it bring them closer to you because they recognize that emotion? Davis?
Yeah, I think anger is very visible, right? I think that whether you're having a conversation with a coworker or you're having a conversation with a family member, most people can actually identify if somebody is angry just by the way they're talking, by the way they're speaking, their tone. And I think that it's difficult in the moment to kind of like, for some people, and not all, but definitely I think it's difficult for some people to take that anger, acknowledge that they're in that moment, and take a step back. I think that's an issue that most people deal with.
I think it's a hard emotion to hide, right? You can try and hide it, but it doesn't always work out so well.
Yeah, like other emotions, people may confuse them as something else or may not even see it, completely miss it. Anger is one that's very visible. Do you guys ever feel like people are asking you or wondering if you're angry when you're not angry? Do you feel like the intensity of your body language or your mannerisms or just the look on your face ever creates this kind of false understanding that other people might have that you are angry? Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of head. So go ahead, jump in there, Matt.
Yeah, I get that a lot. You know, I can't remember exactly when, but I've had that happen to me a couple times when I'm just standing there minding my own business, and people will look at me and say, "Hey, are you okay?" And it's like,
"Oh wow,
yeah, I'm fine. Why?" I don't know. For me, I've learned that anger is kind of a natural response to a lot of the things that really don't settle well with us, but also I think it doesn't really work too well in trying to get things done. I think there's other ways to get things done without being angry about it. And for me, try to find other ways around it.
I don't know any conversations that have really gone tremendously well, though, when people have said to someone, "Are you angry right now?" As a conversation starter. I remember early on in the time I was at the VA, I was called because there was this bomb threat. And this guy was sitting there, and he was, threatening to bring this bomb into the VA. And we ended up sitting through that, and then he told me he was really grieving because his wife had died, and it was their anniversary, and he broke down. So I think the other part of it is that anger so often, as you said earlier, Kira, it covers grief, and it covers moral injuries and guilt and so many things that, helping people gain that awareness of what they're actually feeling, maybe under the anger, is so critical.
Tip of the iceberg in a sense.
Yeah, often, right?
And on the other end, I found that, just like you were saying, Shauna, just listening can de-escalate, do so much to just help de-escalate someone, help them to feel comforted. This question is for any of you. Have you found any useful ways to express your anger, maybe at home, at work, with friends?
Yeah, I think that I was just having this conversation with a friend of mine the other night, and I told him I think, the common denominator between a lot of, in the culture, in the military culture, is that we want to win. Veterans are all about winning, and we're very competitive. And I think for myself, that's a way that I channel some of that anger. How can I win? How can I win in my life? How can I win in work? And I channel that energy to try to meet that objective.
That's great.
Yeah. And I did the same thing with work. I channeled it to how it would make my job easier and make me better at it, you know. So I did. I used what he's saying, is channeling that, keeping it buried, but knowing in my head I was angry at it. I couldn't do this. Why wasn't it working? So, and then I would get it, and it would be, oh, okay. But I paid the price for it too.
Yeah, sounds like it.
And how did you pay the price for it?
It would make me sick, because I'd get so worked up with my anger and stuff that it would cause me to
physically sick.
just, you know, tighten up and just want to just,
Absolutely.
like an adrenaline rush.
We just have a minute here, and I want to address a question that came in from Vincent from San Ramon. Thank you, Vincent. And Vincent would like to know, have any of the guests had a career damaged due to an anger incident? So we'll open that up a little bit. Do you feel like maybe an anger incident created conflict at work at any time? And I know, Thurman, you've somewhat talked already about that, but Matt and Octavius, feel free to jump in. Do you feel like this ever creates any limits? Again, we have about a minute here. Any restrictions at work?
Not recently. I can remember a moment back when I was in the military. You know, we got some. Me and a coworker didn't agree on something, and I might have, you know, said something or done something that I probably shouldn't have. But it didn't really lead to damaging my career. I think it was more accepted then in the military.
Yeah, right, certainly. Yeah.
For myself, I wouldn't say that I've had my career damaged from anger. I would say that conflict in work is common, and I think that communication is often one of the reasons for that conflict. Varying different types of communication styles. As we were talking earlier, someone could be perceived as being angry just because of their communication style.
Right.
Right. Well, thank you all for being open and honest. This is a very difficult topic to talk about.
Absolutely.
And thank you for staying with us, everyone. We want to take a brief moment to tell you about our topic next month on Veterans Voices. Next month, join us as we explore deeper into the pioneering procedure for PTSD, stellate ganglion block. We'll talk with the doctors leading the way in its research and use on veterans. Up next, we'll be speaking with a veteran and his spouse who will share some of their experiences with anger. Please stay with us.
Thanksgiving in Vietnam takes many forms. At the 5th Special Forces camp near Bien Hoa, the traditional turkey is readied for a rather untraditional journey. Prepared by Sergeant Lonnie Mitchell, the bird is destined for a Special Forces detachment, dug in at Zom Cot in War Zone D, and accessible only by air. After being carved and packed in Marmite cans, the turkey and trimmings are ready to go. Since the bird can't do any more flying of its own, a chopper does the honors. After being landed at an LZ near the 12-man unit, the eagerly awaited feast is trucked over the last leg of the journey. On reaching the detachment, the sergeant sets up his chow line as quickly as possible. The men are expecting an attack by a North Vietnamese unit, but even that grim prospect doesn't dim their enjoyment. Thanksgiving dinner with cranberry sauce, sweet potatoes, and pumpkin pie still tastes mighty good. Similar airlift operations to many isolated units were typical of this year's Thanksgiving in Vietnam.
Welcome to Army veteran Nick Blake and his wife Brooke from Utah. They reached out to us via Facebook and have joined us both by Skype. So welcome, Nick and Brooke. Hope you can hear us. We can barely hear you.
Oh, sorry about that.
All right, so hey, thanks for joining us. And real quickly, we have about 9 minutes to have this conversation, a little shorter than we scheduled. But tell us a little bit about your military service, Nick.
I joined the military in 2000. I deployed to Iraq 05 to 06. I was in an Army National Guard unit, field artillery. When we got deployed, we called ourselves infantry, though, because we did a bunch of patrol missions 75% of the time.
Well, thank you for your service. So we've been talking a lot about anger tonight, and much has been said, but we really hope to get both your perspectives on how anger has been a challenge for you in your life. And I really like to hear from Brooke first, because we oftentimes don't get to hear from the spouse. And Brooke, you really reached out to us a lot on Facebook. So tell us about how anger has, if at all, been a challenge for you as an individual and for you as a couple.
Yeah, it's been really challenging, especially as I've watched stress in further details in our lives together, you know, and it's interesting to bring every.
I'm going to pause you for just a second, Brooke, and we're going to continue to stay with you, but if you could be a little closer to the microphone, maybe we could hear you a little bit better. So please just pick up right where you left off, but we need you a little closer to the microphone, please. Thanks.
The biggest thing for me as a spouse has been trying to not be offended by it. I have to compartmentalize myself and almost use his own tactic to separate myself from the anger and realize it's not me, this is not our kids, this is Cruz from this thing, that his reaction that he can't control. It's been very eye-opening myself. Try to not get angry. And do that back.
And Brooke, can you tell us, how do you do that? How do you compartmentalize and deal with your own emotions at the time to be able to not take it personal?
I think that I can see him as a painful. I see it as pain more. I see the anger as pain. So I think that I turn into a caretaker instead of getting angry.
So, Nick, if you could say a little bit about, she really kind of connected your anger to pain. Do you feel like you've been in any kind of pain? Is pain something that you deal with? Or is there some type of underlying other type of emotion that anger has covered up for you?
Well, I would say anger is a big cover-up emotion. I mean, that's why it is connected to PTSD so heavily. Anger is a way we use it as a tool to survive. It helps us pull that trigger when we're scared. It helps us face that suicide bomb. Whatever we have to deal with in a survival situation, we grab that anger to get us past that emotion that might cause us to freeze or hold, something that may cause us to die if we're not able to act. Hesitate. And so I would say, absolutely, it is connected to pain. It is connected to fear. Really dig down and figure out, what am I doing to myself? That's where the anger comes in.
So far tonight, we've been talking to individuals about how anger has been a challenge for them. But the unique thing about this is that the two of you are sitting there together. How do you think that you've been able to work together to make sure that anger has been a healthy emotion in your life? What has made you unique in your relationship, or what has been some of the biggest challenges that you've been able to overcome? Because I see the two of you as potentially a model for couples that really do struggle with anger in their relationship.
Yeah, I see, like I said before, the pain, the grief, the loss, the things that he doesn't want to deal with. I try to work through and help see it if he allows me.
Brooke, we need you a little closer, because we can hear Nick just fine when he talks, so a little closer to the microphone, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think that what I really try to do is see if it's grief underneath, if it's loss underneath. His dad died this last year, and I could see it with grief, that he was trying to get over every time he used his anger. It's been definitely the hardest thing in our marriage, honestly, is taking over his anger, to accept all of the other wonderful things that we have. So it's a challenge.
And Nick, what about you? How have you been able to really work through this, which, you know, Brooke mentioned that she oftentimes has taken the role as caregiver when she recognizes your anger. How have you been supportive to her and working through this?
The biggest thing I've had to realize is that communication has to take place if I want to keep her in my life. She's been ready to leave me a few times because of anger or issues that's going on. I've had to be vulnerable. I've had to really dig down into those dark places within me, say, this is what is eating. This is what is driving this, doing it. And without that, I don't be here together.
Yeah, I can make it about me, like you're angry at me. He comes out and tells me, oh, it's good. You know, we have to talk, we have to communicate, we have to have a dialogue. We have to have tools set up and safeguards and make sure that communication is helpful and not hurtful.
And you both shared so much on Facebook about how you both deal with each other, with the anger, with supporting each other. How Nick was able to learn how to talk more and express other emotions. I believe, I can't remember if that was you, Brooke, or Nick,
yeah,
that was talking about expressing other emotions. Can you tell us a little bit about what that's been like for you, Nick?
Yeah, it's been kind of scary, to be honest with you. The time I kind of realized I had to leave combat as a profession, I actually went from military to law enforcement for several years. Military brother of mine took his life, and that was kind of the point I realized that I was done. And I really started directing my attention at getting rid of my anger and trying to diffuse it and start asking myself, what am I telling myself in my head that's causing me to react with white-hot rage?
I'm going to speak here really quick and say that when he started to be aware and really look at it, it turned to sadness pretty frequently. He would cry instead. And I was freaked out. I had never seen him like this daily. So it was a new emotion and it was very frequent. And we literally had to tell the kids, like, this is the new dad. We don't know if it's going to last really long, but it's better than anger. Crying. And it was really helpful in a lot of circumstances to see him that vulnerable for everybody.
And thank you both for sharing that with us. We know that sadness can be a very difficult emotion to express. It can make you feel very vulnerable. So we just really, really appreciate you, the both of you, being on here tonight sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you. We appreciate all of you guys.
If I could say one other thing. You guys mentioned self-talk earlier, and that's been a big thing my counselor has talked to me about. Recognizing when you're going to enter a risk situation and begin the self-talk early, prepared for that, so that you can kind of come at the before it.
Thank you again, Brooke and Nick, for joining us all the way from Utah. Really appreciate the two of you following Veterans Voices. It's really neat for me to know that we're reaching out into the community way outside of Contra Costa County. So we hope that you guys can continue to join us for many shows in the future, contribute over Facebook, call in with questions and comments. Nick, honor your service, sir, and Brooke, certainly honor you as a spouse and your unwavering support of your husband through a very difficult time. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Now we would like to take a moment to recognize the military service and ultimate sacrifice of Bert M. Berg. Bert died during World War II at the Battle of Tarawa on November 22nd, 1943. This is the 75th year after he gave his life in service of peace. Written on the letter from President Roosevelt, it reads, "He stands in the unbroken line of patriots who have dared to die that freedom might live and grow and increase its blessings. Freedom lives, and through it he lives in a way that humbles the undertakings of most men."
Now we'd like to share some resources with you. If you are a service member, veteran in crisis, or if you're concerned about one, consider calling the Veterans Crisis Line at 1-800-273-8255 and press 1 to talk to someone. Headstrong offers cost-free assistance to veterans and connects them with experienced clinicians and individualized care without the wait time and extensive forms. Learn more at getheadstrong.org. Vets for Warriors is a 24/7 confidential peer support network for veteran and military communities that provides immediate, free, and long-term peer support to veterans and those that care for them through confidential phone, chat, text, and email conversations to help those who served live better lives. Learn more at vetsforwarriors.com. Coaching into Care is a national telephone service of the VA which aims to educate, support, and empower family members and friends who are seeking care or services for a veteran. Learn more at mirecc.va.gov/coaching. To rewatch tonight's episode, check back on our homepage later this week or check your cable provider's schedule for rebroadcast times. You can also rewatch this episode and many others on our YouTube channel, Veterans Voices of Contra Costa, so be sure to subscribe. Our next live broadcast will be the Monday, December 17th at 7 p.m. Be sure to tune in. I want to thank all of our guests tonight, those that are on stage, off stage. I want to thank our very hardworking CCTV staff and those that were able to join us by Skype. This is probably one of the most dynamic shows we've had, and certainly one of the most difficult conversations we've had as well. So this is Veterans Voices, wishing you all a happy Thanksgiving, signing off, and hoping that you'll have a relaxing evening. And now Steve Burchick, who will recite a Thanksgiving prayer that he first heard 50 years ago during his tour in Vietnam.
Our gracious Father, whose power and deity is apparent through the things that are made, hear our prayer. We thank Thee for the love which we share with family and friends, which prompts us to call the stranger neighbor. We thank Thee for health and sound bodies, whereby we may serve Thee, our country, and others. We thank Thee for the United States and for all that is right and noble in her past and present. We thank Thee for a world in which the voices of honorable and wise men can still be heard. Above all, our Father, we thank Thee for Thyself. In our pause to give thanks, we are again reminded that we are debtors indeed. Lead our nation by leading each of us in Thy service. For Thy kingdom's sake, amen.